Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That Deep Flush Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. Maybe today more so than usual, given the pre-conversation beard talk we were having. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering to discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. Joining me today, we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What's going on? And making his return to the show, Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
Doing great.
Excellent, excellent. So today we're going to be talking all about the Marvels. Once again, kicking Echo down kicking the can of Echo down the line, because we've been talking about that the last couple weeks, and then it's like, oh, actually, let's do this instead. The Marvels obviously came out to Disney Plus this week, so we figured might as well throw that in here. So that's why we picked it. I will also throw out there for more information or more thoughts on the Marvels. Feel free to check out our spoiler cast back from November 13th. That Nerdy Site Show episode 193, where Cam and I sat down and shared our thoughts, kind of hot off seeing the film. But yeah, now we're gonna get Logan's take kind of thrown into the mix and just kind of talk about the latest MCU thing. So our history lesson here, originally released November 10th, 2023. Other releases of the time, we had the duo of The Creator and Saw X back on September 29th, 2023. Then we had Taylor Swift The Eras Tour, October 13th.
Hell yeah.
Killers
You started running through.
Huh?
You started running through this, and I had already forgotten that this came out this last year now, but just this past like 12-month year, and I was like, This just came out. How is that possible? This came out like years ago. That's how long ago I thought this movie came out. I thought it was like 2022 or 2021. I was like, what the heck?
Oh, yeah, nope.
Continue.
Killers of the Flower Moon was October 20th. The duo of Five Nights at Freddy's and Oscar, nominated thing, The Holdovers, was October 27th. Then we had the Marvels here on November 10th, followed by The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes on November 17th. The trio of A Little Bit of Something for Anybody, I guess, with Wish, Maestro, and Good Burger 2 on November 22nd.
I need to watch Good Burger 2 still. That's a good reminder.
Yeah, I think that's out on Peacock, right? Renaissance, a film by Beyonce on December 1st. Poor Things, December 8th, and Wonka on December 15th.
I finally watched Poor Things, by the way.
It's been a little while since we've done one of these, so our box office breakdown, where I know and I'm looking at the box office rankings for the year, and I give Cameron and Logan the chance to guess where this fell in the box office. Usually, these are top 10 movies that we're talking about. I will give you guys just a freebie right here. This one is nowhere near the top 10.
Nope, not even close.
The domestic gross was $84.5 million, down from the $426.8 million that the first Captain Marvel film did. And I'll say, to give you a sense, I will give you that the number 10 movie in our list of films from 2023 domestically was Sound of Freedom at $184 million. So where do you think $84.5 million lands the Marvels on the 2023 box office list? Now, admittedly, there's a lot of big budget movies that did not do well last year. This is just one of many. So where does this fall, do you think?
I'm going to say 24th.
24th? Okay. How about you, Cameron?
I think it did worse. I think it's at the 28th.
28th. All right. Well, number 24 is Migration, which I believe is the DreamWorks.
It's the DreamWorks.
Yeah, it's the DreamWorks animated one. Family film there did $107.1 million.
Ooh, okay.
Number 28, your vote, Cam. The Equalizer 3 at $92.3 million.
Oh wow!
The Marvels,
Cameron, that was a good throw in the dart. You're gonna be close.
Marvel's number 30 domestically.
Good job, Cam.
Just behind The Equalizer 3 and The Nun 2, with $86.2 million. I think it was one of the horror ones. And the Marvels just above Meg 2: The Trench at $82 million.
I feel like we've talked about Meg 2 The Trench a lot. I feel like we keep getting these movies that are around that neighborhood.
Oh yeah, I mean like Haunted Mansion that we've done an episode on was number 36. Killers of the Flower Moon was number 35. Blue Beetle 34.
Maybe
so
Blue
yeah,
Beetle,
Evil Dead Rise was 37.
that was a good movie.
It's down there in the like Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves, which we all loved, was number 27, just above the Equalizer.
So we've
3.
definitely talked about it in this context. And,
We've lived in this block.
Dial
Other
of Destiny
episodes,
somewhere in that neighborhood too, I think, right?
Dial of Destiny.
Is that like 18, 19?
Yes. Where did Dial of Destiny end up? Dial of Destiny ended up having pretty decent legs. It might not have done as well internationally. We'll see. But domestically, it was 174 million. So it's up at number 12, just behind Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour. I think that's probably what's in your mind, is like that Taylor Swift knocked it out of like the top 10 at the time. And then Wonka came along and knocked both of them out. It was a rough year for the big blockbuster things. So yes, number 30 domestically. And then we move over to the worldwide gross, where, as a reminder, the first Captain Marvel did $1.13 billion. And sadly, this one came in with a paltry $195.2 million worldwide. I say paltry as if I wouldn't love to have $195 million, but
I would be curious to know if it's like the biggest first movie to sequel drop in like history, really, arguably, right? I mean, that's a $1 billion difference essentially.
Probably.
So, like, I'd be curious.
Yeah. It's certainly possible.
Yeah.
So where do you think this fell worldwide on the worldwide list?
It was 30 domestic.
Yep.
Gosh, did it do better or worse worldwide? Because
that's like the weird thing.
You have to take into consideration a lot of like Chinese films and other things like that.
The much like I gave you the number 10 on the domestic, I'll give you number 10 worldwide was Elemental with 496 million. So
that's a lot more.
Where does 195 million fall in comparison to that?
God, Elemental's so good.
I'm shot in the dark. I'm gonna stick with 28.
Okay. What about you, Logan?
It was around Meg 2. It was around Dungeons and Dragons territory, Equalizer. I just don't know if I think Marvel's did better than any of those movies that are in its neighborhood. I might actually go down. I might say I think it did 32nd.
32nd?
Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys are really good at nailing where the Equalizer is on this list, because number 32 is Equalizer 3. $191 million.
So it's like right there.
Oh, my apologies. The numbers have shifted a little bit since I pulled these. So actually, the box office is currently 206.2 million.
Controversy.
Not that $11 million, but I mean $11 million in the last week, not bad.
Yeah.
And you said 28, Cameron?
Yeah.
28, Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves.
Okay.
208 million worldwide. The Marvels actually just stays at number 30 worldwide.
Wow. We literally split the difference on that one.
206 million, yep. 206.1 million, rather. So apologies on not catching that to update the actual figures, but I don't imagine that would have changed your guesses drastically. But yes, so Equalizer fell a little bit, more worldwide. So I thought that was funny that you both landed on that one. Marvel's fell between Trolls Band Together, lost that by about $200,000, 206.2 million, and then Paw Patrol: The Mighty Movies at number 31.
That's right,
about $4 million behind the Marvels. So yeah, it was a rough year for the Marvels. By comparison, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 worldwide was number 4 at the box office, 845 million. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse was number 6. 690 million. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is at number 11, falling just outside the worldwide box office, 476. And then
that's bad.
I guess that was all three of the big Marvel
The fact that
films.
Ant-Man did that much better is
disappointing.
disappointing. I said the fact that Ant-Man did that much better is kind of disappointing.
Yeah, it was back before everybody was like, "Oh, these are just
Burnout.
Maybe these are just
else.
bad now."
Yeah.
I don't know if I like. Yeah, but we'll get into it later.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not using that as a commentary on like the quality of the
for
Marvels.
sure. Yeah, no,
I'm saying like people watched Ant-Man excited for the Quantum Mania and like the introduction to kind of the next phase and the Kang Dynasty stuff, and then it ended up kind of just being like maligned by most critics, even before a lot of the Jonathan Majors stuff was really kind of blowing up. But then obviously, that didn't help things.
Guardians is very divisive, like we've talked about.
Yeah,
right?
Guardians at least had like it's like James Gunn kind of behind it. It's that it's his swan song in the MCU.
But even going back to before Ant-Man, right? I mean, Thor: Love and Thunder from last year too, right?
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean? Like, also was kind of got like another like reaction. Doctor Strange is another one, right?
Yep. Our runtime, an hour and 45 minutes. In the Marvel Films timeline of things, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania was February of last year, followed by Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 in May, then the Marvels in November, and then a whole bunch of stuff got shifted because of all the strikes last year. And so the only Marvel movie we're getting this year, Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, despite the like 3 Spider-Verse films that are coming out with Madam Web, Kraven, and Venom 3, I guess, is Deadpool in July. Deadpool 3 is slated to come out July 26th. And then next on the docket after that, Captain America Brave New World in Valentine's Day 2025. So go enjoy the new Captain America film. Happy Valentine's Day next year.
Where are we at with Deadpool 3?
Deadpool 3?
It wrapped filming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, where are we at in terms of like how excited or unexcited are we for that movie?
I'm incredibly curious to see how much Deadpool rips being now part of the MCU and being part of like the Disney brand. I'm very curious. The fact that they're keeping it R-rated, the fact that Hugh Jackman's involved, I think there's going to be Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds are a ton of fun together.
Yeah.
In general, so I think they're going to be able to get like kind of unhinged a little bit there, and then I think the rumors are dabbling. I mean, like I think Jennifer Garner's supposed to be reprising her role as Elektra, so I think they're playing with a whole bunch of multiverse stuff and probably going to take a lot of the shit out of a lot of it. So I think I'm interested, and I'm glad it's the only one coming out this year, because I think that they do kind of need to like pull the reins back a little bit and focus on what makes a good story as opposed to just cranking out the Marvel
4
factory.
of them in a year. Right.
So that's where I'm at. How about you, Cam?
For me, I'm cautiously optimistic / morbidly optimistic. Like, I don't particularly care if it's a good movie as long as it maintains that level of energy and humor that the Deadpool 1 and 2 have. That matters more to me than like, how is this going to interact with the MCU? I don't care how it interacts with the MCU. I don't care. Like, there's nothing greater than at the end of Deadpool 2, they take the entire piss out of the entire Deadpool story, like emotional story points of 1 and 2 by having him go back in time and fuck around with it. It's great. I love that aspect of it. And it's a matter of like, I'm cautiously optimistic about it because of like all the things Trevor said about it. And I'm morbidly optimistic because even if it's not good on story level or it does that, as long as it accomplishes itself by being a quote unquote good Deadpool movie, I'm cool with that. I think it is what a stark moment for the MCU that the only MCU movie coming out this year is not even an OG MCU property. It's a Fox one. But I also have to say I'm very, and I'll put it this way. Marvel Cinematic, like the Marvel Cinematic experience has, unfortunately for most people, not for me, but for most people, has become very much the Marvel comic book experience. You have characters that you know. They are in movies that may be written by people that have previously written them before. Maybe they're new people. Maybe there's a new director. There's a lot of things that go into a comic book, like a comic book run of a character, and about who's writing that run. What artist is like drawing that run? What's the, like, who's even inking? Like, there's a lot of layers of nerdy analysis you can do on comic books to kind of like piece together, like, why was this comic book run good, but this comic run over here bad? Like, where do those things come into play? And I think that, unfortunately for most people, they aren't prepared to really take a look at that and say, well, I think it was bad because of this. Like, the problem with the Marvel movies is that they've become comic books with their tangential tie-ins, the big event one. Like, we literally have watched them turn the Marvel Cinematic Universe into a, like, not one-to-one copy of it, but very much on the same secular problem that comic books today run into, where the best comic books have nothing to do with the general Marvel or DC line. It's the one-shots, it's the limited runs. Yeah. All my favorite comic book like runs over the last like 20 years, for the most part, have been limited runs, like 12-issue runs. Like, hey, this author and this artist have this character for a year. We're going to let them do whatever they want with it, and we'll like figure out how it ties in later. Or it'll be its own side thing and not even part of like the main continuity or canon. Deadpool thrives in those things, which is why I'm interested in seeing how this works out with it. But yeah, I really think that Marvels is a great example of this. If you like Captain Marvel, if you liked Miss Marvel, there's a good chance that you really like this movie. If you were not on board with either of any of those characters or the shows or their tie-ins previously, you are probably not going to have a good time. Quantumania had its own things that it has its multitude of problems that we've talked about multiple times, so I won't go into it. But I really do feel like we have reached a comic bookification. I'm going to use the full term.
Comic bookification.
Yeah, I was going to go with comication or comification, but comic bookification works better, I think. So yeah, we've reached a comic bookification of the Marvel Cinematic Films, and everything and it's so funny because I just reconciled this just like while Trevor was talking about like the problems with Marvel movies, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the problem with Marvel comic books. This is the same exact issue with Marvel comic books. Like, where are the stakes?
Comics in general.
Comics in general,
it's not
for
Marvel
sure.
versus DC. Yeah. It is like everybody gets into that, like, hey, I read the things I want to read and care about, or I dip out for a while and then I'll, occasionally try and hop back in or something.
Or if you hear like an artist or a author is coming back, like Judd Winnick, if he ever comes back for anything Red Hood, I'm there 1000%. Judd Winnick is like he's the original Red Hood author. He's one of my favorite authors. He's also a like profound comic book author because he got his big break by writing a book about my friend Pedro.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where do you fall on this conversation, Logan? You posed the question initially, but where are you at in terms of like thinking about Deadpool coming up? I appreciate that Cameron has like gone off on this.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I'm reining us back in because we don't need to talk. We don't need to hear about the Red Hood guy.
Yep, we're good
on the Miss Marvel or the Marvels episode here.
Totally fair.
I think I'm not too dissimilar from Cam, right? I mean, morbid curiosity, I think, is a good description for me. I don't love Deadpool to begin with, right? I mean, it was one of those movies that I always thought I would, and then we watched it, and I was like, oh, this movie must have come out in like 2013 or 12 based on its humor, and it was like 2018, whatever it was, and I was like, oh my god, it is not funny by 2018 standards, but 2012 maybe. And
welcome to Deadpool.
I think it's was never quite as like great as I kind of wanted it to be. and I'm also of like the persuasion that like it's a weird situation for me where like I think Logan is such a perfect exit for Jackman's Wolverine, right? Like I think it's the best of all of the X-Men movies.
Absolutely.
Logan. And it's just sort of that realization of like, this isn't going to be better than Logan. And so like, it's so part of me is just sort of like, then why are we going to do this kind of thing? I am excited for how much Ryan Reynolds and company kind of take the piss out of like Disney and the like multiverse and that kind of stuff. Like that I think can be really clever, and that I think can be really cool, and allowing themselves to be mocked, because I feel like the MCU doesn't have a lot of chances to be that self-aware, and this is a case where they really can be, and that's exciting. But my concerns are just like, how funny is it gonna be, and how juvenile is it gonna be? But you know, Hugh Jackman's great. I love him. I love Ryan Reynolds. It's just sort of that. It's another instance of me being like, it's okay to, you know, and it's funny to say this in the context of a comic book, which are by design things that don't end, but it's like, it's okay to just like end things and let people go. And like Hugh Jackman did Wolverine for 20 years. He can be done with it now. It's okay to like let that go. But we're obviously not in that world, because that's just not what comics are, A, and B, that's not what making movies that will make lots of money are either.
Yeah.
But
nail in the head, by the way. It's like, that's not how comics are. Yeah, there's plenty of comic book characters that would have been better off retired already.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Oh my god. Yeah.
I mean,
a million.
We talk about we talk about often, especially in the X-Men like universe, like Magneto's origin story being so innately tied to the Holocaust is like, he's aged out. Like that doesn't work anymore. He doesn't work as a bad guy anymore.
You're 90-year-old.
His current age. So they made that work with Captain America by throwing him in the ice, and so I guess they could freeze Magneto too, and he can just bear that resentment after being thawed out. But
to Cameron's point, like it in some ways it is sort of amazing that Robin is not still Dick Grayson. And not just that it's not Dick Grayson, but that we've gone through like 4 to 5 to 6. I mean, I count it like canon
5
Robins, and they've just they just like let them do that, right? Like, because like that is sort of the exception to the comic rule, and not the rule. And I think it's just like Cameron already said it, but like comics by their nature are cyclical. That's the whole point of them, right? That these are stories that don't end. The problem is that stories are supposed to end, and so you're inevitably going to come into tension with how stories work and how comics work.
Yeah,
and it's not always the same author, which means that interpretations of characters can vary wildly, because somebody can be like, "Well, I read this person's run of it," and
I mean, we've seen that. I would argue most notably in the movie space. In the Thor films, going from Branagh to, I forget who did Thor: The Dark World, but to obviously Taika Waititi.
I mean, I would arguably, we've seen it most prominently in the movie space with Batman himself.
Oh,
right?
yeah, I mean, sure.
The difference in interpretations from Burton to Schumacher to Nolan to everything, right? Like it, like, and to be fair, like that is part of what keeps these characters timeless, is these different interpretations, but you're also into the meme of like, how many times are we going to see Bruce Wayne's parents get murdered, right? How many times are we going to see Uncle Ben die, right? It's like you're also going to have to kind of do certain things or take creative ways to kind of get around the fact that we have to start back here every time to go forward.
Well, we'll find out more about our thoughts on Deadpool, I imagine, come like probably like October, November range.
That's
for when it'll probably hit D+. So I guess it'd probably be November, since we'll inevitably do Halloween-y themed stuff in October, as we always do.
I don't know what we have left though. I mean, Treehouse of Horror.
Treehouse of Horror.
Done with Halloween Town, right?
No more Halloween Town.
Yeah, Halloween Town's finally done. Thank God.
We did that, right?
But I'm sure I'm sure there's still other Halloween
Twitches
stuff out there. Yeah, sure, we can dive into like Disney Channel original movie territory that outside of, because we've already done like Phantom of the Megaplex, we've already done My Mom's Got a Date with the Vampire. So there's still other options, I'm sure, to pull from.
Absolutely,
there's a lot
as we dive into like the dark ages of stuff I haven't even heard of or seen.
Yeah.
But, So back to the Marvels here. Our roll call. Director Nia DaCosta, having previously directed projects like Little Woods and Candyman ahead of the Marvels.
Mm-hmm.
She also was one of the writers on the film, having also worked on and written Little Woods and Candyman. And then additional writers, Megan McDonnell, who was a story editor for WandaVision, also kind of involved here with the Marvels, and Alyssa Karasik. She previously wrote Loki prior to this, and then following the Marvels, also worked on Lessons in Chemistry, also with Brie Larson. Our cast of characters, of course, Brie Larson returning as Carol Danvers / Captain Marvel, which she has been playing since 2019. So it's so weird to think she's only been Captain Marvel since 2019, since I guess like her casting announcement was probably like 2 or 3 years prior to that. So it just feels like she's been in the space that much longer. But of course, she's also been in projects like Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. She had a few good episodes in Community that I always enjoy. Room, Kong Skull Island, and then
I
Fast
forgot she was
X.
in Kong. Yeah.
Kong Skull Island. She's in Fast X, joining that franchise last year. And then after this, she was in the Scott Pilgrim Takes Off animated series on Netflix last year, and Lessons in Chemistry.
Shout out to
a weird
Room,
thing.
oh, go ahead, Logan.
I was just gonna say a weird thing I learned today, thanks to like the YouTube short algorithm. Apparently, Chris Nolan is like a legitimate fan of the Fast and Furious series.
Yes,
and it's one of the weirdest things I've learned in a while. I think I'm just like, oh, that breaks my brain a little bit.
it totally works if you think about it.
Yeah, did you hear the one that made the rounds last year was he really likes the movie Talladega Nights?
Yes.
The Ballad of Ricky Bobby.
Yeah. I don't know if I've told this story to y'all at all.
I mean, is this where you reveal more of your Florida man background?
No, this is Missouri, where Brandon, who you both met now, we were in 2006. Talladega Nights came out, so junior high, like into junior high, beginning of high school, and Talladega Nights came out, and Brandon spent he saw it before me by like a week or something, and he spent the whole time being like, it's the funniest movie ever, it's the greatest thing ever, it's like it's my favorite movie of all time now, I love it, oh my god, it's amazing, it's a masterpiece, it's so funny, oh my god, Will Ferrell kind of thing. And I was like, oh my god, yeah, hell yeah, let's go, right? And like I watched it, and I came out of the theater and was like, that was like not that good actually. And so because of that, and for the last now 18 years since 2006, I always talk about like Brandon Talladega Nighted me, right? And it became like a verb of like, like if you hype something up so much that when you watch it, it like can't live up to expectations. And so we'll still refer to like Talladega Nighting each other about something if we like hype it up and then someone watches it, it's like not that great. And so the first thing I always think about for Talladega Nights is, it's just how I would describe
that
overhyping something.
Yeah,
like overhyping something is Talladega Nights.
I legitimately love Talladega Nights. It's because it's the movie personified. Like, right? It's just bits. It's just bits thrown together with some light story. And I freaking love all the bits in it. Whether it's he gets the knife stuck in his leg, and so he's like, I'm gonna cut around it, cut up my leg, cut it out. Whether it's the I'm gonna throw your war medals off the freeway, or what do you guys do today? We threw Grandpa's war medals off the freeway, and it's just like these horrible little children, these horrible little children.
I've seen this thing once, so I have no innate memories tied to it.
I think the best part of the stick and the knife in the leg is when he's talking to his like crew chief, whatever, and he's like, "Don't you put that on me, Ricky Bobby? Don't you put that on me?"
It's because he says,
when he's like, "I hope your son is paralyzed."
Like, I hope you have a son, and he's beautiful, and one day he's struck and paralyzed. And he says, "Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby? Don't you put that evil on me?"
It's a great delivery. Yeah.
Michael Clark Duncan.
Is phenomenal.
Or Michael Duncan Clark, black guy from
Green
8 Mile. Or Green Mile, that's it. Not 8 Mile, no, not that one.
8 Mile. 8 Mile. Not Mekhi Phifer.
No. Green Mile.
Not Mekhi Phifer.
No, he's spectacular in that movie. That's just one of the reasons why that movie works. That movie also has like Amy Adams in it.
Yeah.
And like like just
John C.
a
Reilly.
ton.
Right.
Yeah, John C. Reilly.
All right, back to the
Sacha Baron
Marvels.
Cohen.
We can't keep going down rabbit holes every 5 minutes. Teyonah Parris playing Monica Rambeau. She's previously in Dear White People, If Beale Street Could Talk. And obviously she kind of started playing Monica in WandaVision. She was also in Candyman, as well as the film They Cloned Tyrone. And then following this, she was in one of the Disney Plus holiday movies that came out last year, Dashing Through the Snow.
I didn't know that.
Iman Vellani, of course, as Kamala Khan / Miss Marvel, having infamously made her debut in Miss Marvel, the series. Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, who's been playing Fury since Iron Man in 2008. And I've got some trivia on just how many appearances that is in a little bit. But he's, of course, also been in notable projects like Pulp Fiction, Snakes on a Plane, and The Hateful Eight. Zawe Ashton plays Dar-Ben, aka the villain, in case you didn't catch her named like once or twice in the movie. She was previously in projects like Greta, Velvet Buzzsaw, and The Handmaid's Tale. Park Seo-joon is Prince Yan. He's definitely a South Korean actor of some note and has done a lot there. The only thing I recognize, though, is Parasite, and I believe he is like the tutor that leaves and kind of kicks like the events of Parasite off when he recommends, hey, you should be the tutor in my place. I believe that's who he was.
I think so, yeah.
But yeah,
because he's not in the rest of the movie. I don't recall him being in the majority of it, but I do recall him being in like a small role at the beginning. So.
Zenobia Shroff is Muniba Khan, aka Miss Marvel's mother, having been in projects like The Big Sick and Miss Marvel. Mohan Kapoor as Yusuf, the father, having been in Happy New Year, Hostages, Crime Next Door, and Miss Marvel. And then Sagir Shaikh as Amir, most notably from Miss Marvel, but he's also done a handful of other assorted projects. And then kind of the little cameo category that I have here, Lashana Lynch as Maria Rambeau, which she played in Captain Marvel. She was also 007 in No Time to Die. She's a second Marvel character, the multiverse's Captain Marvel in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Obviously, she plays a third character here in the post-credits scene as Binary. And she's also in the Matilda the musical version that came out end of 22, early 2023, where she plays Miss Honey in that version. Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie has been in the MCU since Thor Ragnarok, but she's also been in projects like the Creed films and Thor Love and Thunder. Also, what's the Boots Riley one that I'm thinking? Can't
help you on that one.
Yeah, it escapes me. Lakeith Stanfield's like the main guy. They do the white man voice.
Oh, it's sorry to bother you.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry to bother you.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry to bother you.
Yeah. And the weird Army Hammer-ness of that movie. Haley Steinfeld as Kate Bishop, having been that role since Hawkeye. But of course, she's also in the Spider-Man Into and Across the Spider-Verse films. Kelsey Grammer as Dr. Henry Hank McCoy / Beast, of course, known from Cheers and Frasier, and reprising his Beast role from X-Men The Last Stand, and then again in X-Men Days of Future Past. So he basically does like one X-Men movie every decade or so. So there we go. Some trivia here. At 1 hour and 45 minutes, this is the shortest MCU film, surpassing the Incredible Hulk and Thor: The Dark World, which were both an hour and 52 minutes. This is the 33rd film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And of those 33 films, this is the 15th MCU project. So not all films, but the 15th MCU project that Samuel L. Jackson's been in. Those other projects being Iron Man, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America: First Avenger, The Avengers, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Avengers: Age of Ultron, Avengers: Infinity War, Captain Marvel, Avengers: Endgame, Spider-Man: Far From Home, What If, and Secret Invasion. And maybe infamously, but there was definitely a fun thing that kind of made the rounds around the time Miss Marvel came out, where the character of Bruno from Miss Marvel had, just from that series, more screen time than Samuel L. Jackson had in everything in the MCU up to that point, because he's always he pops in for a minute or two and then he's gone.
Yeah.
Secret Invasion, I imagine, has finally done away with that, and he's probably moved up the rankings because of that. But yeah, it was like, well, yeah, he does not show up that much. The movie premiered in Las Vegas on November 7th, prior to the end of the actors' strike, which happened on November 9th. Then it opened in wide release November 10th with virtually no promotional appearances from its stars. So, that will inevitably and always be an asterisk around this movie's like very poor box office. Let alone just the fact that Disney has kind of cannibalized their own like film industry post-pandemic by putting everything on Disney Plus. I imagine it will be a long time before Disney has another $1 billion box office thing. Because people are like, well, I can just wait a couple months and it'll be on Disney Plus. It grossed $46 million domestically in its opening weekend, lower than any MCU film, surpassing, once again, The Incredible Hulk's 2008 $55 million debut. However, despite that low opening, it also has marked the best opening ever for a black female director. And the 195.2 million, or now 200 and whatever it was million, that the film has brought in, surpassed the $132 million that Ava DuVernay's A Wrinkle in Time did. So it is also now the highest grossing film directed by a black woman. And I want to highlight that because that's definitely a story that got lost in the shuffle when everybody's like, this is the death of the MCU. It's like, yeah, but also this is an incredible accomplishment for her. So,
and correct me if I'm wrong, this was an all-female writing staff as well, right? Like
it looked like it when he ran through the writers earlier. Yeah.
When you read that, I was like, black female directed, all female like lead writers,
all female
leads.
Yeah.
Like this is a very groundbreaking movie in a lot of ways, and yet all we can talk about is how it affects the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah. And admittedly, that the $200 million that it brought in was against a reported $220 to $275 million budget, and so therefore it was one of many box office flops that Disney and superhero movies in general had in 2023.
Everyone in general, it was just not the best year for anyone, really. Yeah.
Unless you were
Barbie or Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer.
Yeah. I mean, Super Mario Brothers still did well.
Yeah. I think Barbie and Oppenheimer like strangled the last half of the year, I feel like.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Iman Vellani, in addition to playing Miss Marvel, also wrote the limited series comics run Miss Marvel: The New Mutant in 2023. So she has like she's one of very few people who has played a character and also written that character in the comics. So that's neat. And then the last little bit of trivia here that I pulled in is among the code names that Miss Marvel gives to Monica Rambeau, Pulsar and Spectrum are notable because they are actually titles that she has held. And I believe Photon is also in there, which was one of her mother's call signs, Maria Rambeau's call sign. So yeah, nods to the character's comic book past there among the flurry of names. I was honestly surprised they don't just like land on one of them and be like, yeah, okay, we'll go with that. And it just being one of the ones that she had in the comics. But I guess if they're gonna more or less write her out at the end of the movie, they don't need to care about that too much.
Quick shout out to Marvel Snap, the game on it's on other devices, but I play it on my phone. For the Marvel's tie-in that they did right when I was starting up into it. One of the little taglines that you can attach to like your profile in deck when you're like battling people that you see other people's taglines is, do you even ram, bow? It's good stuff.
All right. So that's it for the trivia. Let's dive into what we thought of the film. Since Cameron and I talked about it at length on That Nerdy Site show, and this was your first time catching it, Logan, I want to throw it to you first. What did you think of the Marvels, especially because you are a big fan of Miss Marvel? It's, I think, one of your favorite of the MCU shows, if not your favorite. So yeah, what did you think of the movie?
I think it's a interesting movie that, in a lot of ways, to me, symbolizes and exemplifies the strengths and weaknesses of the MCU right now, right? I mean, I think it is a movie that feels like it is at a crossroads in the larger series that it's in, right? I say a lot that the midpoint in a book series is usually one of the messier and oftentimes weakest ones, because they're trying to like almost change everything from one starting point in the series to kind of where it's going to go to at the end. And I feel like that's just this entire era of the MCU right now, right? Where we did what came first, and now we're trying to shift it into something else, and everything that we've seen has just been messy, right? Like we were kind of looking at the list of MCU movies post Endgame, and I'd go so far as to say that I don't think any of them are great, with the exception of No Way Home, and even that one has a huge asterisk on it, right? Because it's essentially the end of that trilogy and not really furthering the larger MCU point as much, right? And because it's bringing back like 20 years of Spider-Man stories, right? And it's such an anomaly compared to everything else. And I think everything else has struggled with, all right, what do we do now, right? And some, couldn't be helped, right? In terms of like Black Panther, obviously things were out of their control in that one. But I think there's just been a feeling of general malaise and unsureness about the MCU. And I think one of the things to me that has been the biggest shot in the arm to the series is Miss Marvel. I think that is a character who brings so much joy and so much infectious energy and excitement and goofiness and silliness and lightheartedness, all of which are things that I would argue the MCU's sort of missed in its almost 20-year run generally. Especially this spirit of, I think, lightheartedness and kind of fun. I think Guardians of the Galaxy is a different type. Then anytime that character pops up on screen, I think it's hard to not enjoy what you're watching. I feel largely the same way about Brie Larson. Really all of the three leads, I think I like a lot. It's just sort of what they're being asked to do, I think. Trevor made the joke of like, a main villain whose name we barely even know, right? And it's just a weird film, I think, in a lot of ways. And it's, to me, just emblematic of a weird spot in the MCU, right? So, like a lot of the MCU movies that come out right now, it's not my favorite. It's also not my least favorite. It occupies kind of that gray space. But I do think that here, unlike in Doctor Strange or Thor or Guardians, or even Ant-Man, this to me is this should be the future of what the MCU is and looks like. Because I think when it works and when that core trio, I think, is on, and Miss Marvel in particular, I'm like, yeah, that could be the next 10 years of this, right? If they really built around them and gave them a lot to work with. I think this is different. I think it's fun. I think it's unique, and it's a story that I want to see, not one that I'm being told I should see, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Cam, how about you? Any revised thoughts seeing this kind of a second time?
Yeah, I will say, out of all the Marvel films last year, this one, I'm going to use this term, and I mean it quite both figuratively and literally. It was the most palatable, most consumable. Time-wise, it's an hour and 45 minutes.
I agree with that.
it moves at a pace that I don't ever feel like I'm being dragged along at any point. There are points that it left me wanting more from certain parts of this film, which is better than me being like it was superfluous and I didn't need that. Maybe the stuff that I wanted more from isn't really there, doesn't really have a lot of like meat to it, so they cut it. And I'm like, if that's the case, fine. That's totally fine. It's easily more palatable and like consumable compared to like Guardians Volume 3, which is, we've talked about it a lot. I'll just reiterate a single point, which is it's a film that doesn't have its heart for most of that movie. This film is nothing but heart. It's nothing but goodwill. It's nothing but just earnestness. And a lot of that comes from Ms. Marvel. A lot of that comes from that portrayal. But all of it also comes from and this is part of the problem as well. We have so many of these movies coming out. If there's one character that's really gotten the shaft from like the large gaps between their films, it's it's Captain Marvel. Brie Larson's Captain Marvel has gotten 2 films, but has been a quote unquote guest in multiple projects. But it really comes down to, I think, that we got more time with Miss Marvel up until this movie. We got more time with Miss Marvel than we got with Brie Larson as Captain Marvel.
Sure. I mean, that's the case for like most of the shows though. Like we've gotten more time with Loki than we ever got with Thor.
It's true.
Just in the Loki series.
I think that's by nature of that, but also like we have such a massive time gap for Miss Marvel. Like this tries to answer questions that we've stopped we've stopped being bothered to ask about. Like you're giving, and like luckily they don't spend so much time on that, and it's really kind of like we move through that very quickly, which is good because I don't need to know all the nitty-gritty details about something that happened 25 years ago in the film's timelines. It's just not necessary. And it sucks because that's an important part of Captain Marvel's character, is her failure to deal with like how, like I have all the, like I love stories that are about somebody who is like, I have all the power in the universe, but I'm still just a mortal human being. And so how do I use that power to cause significant change that's positive? She makes a big change. She defeats the thing that's been quote unquote like, you know, pseudoly, I'm messing up a bunch of words here. Sorry. That has been, for all intents and purposes, controlling a entire portion of the galaxy and universe through like expansion, conquering, like authoritarianism and mind control. On paper, she defeated her big bad off screen, and that's great. But what was the fallout of that?
It's weird. It's weird that she defeats the Supreme Intelligence via flashback.
Yeah, does that suck? Yes, but it's because we don't have like. Would you have wanted to spend half an hour of this movie it's
because we don't care. We don't even remember. It's been so long, right? We have no investment in it. That's the thing.
That's the problem, is that it's been such a long time since her film.
Yeah.
That this is a ramification of that. We've had so many Marvel films, but none of them have really been about Captain Marvel. And so her story had to move on to this point. What's
especially weird about that sequence for me, and I'll throw it back to you to finish up any thoughts on here, is just like the like going back and like destroying the Supreme Intelligence. She describes it, and it's shown to us almost as if it was like the end of the movie, the last movie, but it wasn't. It's just a thing that like we hadn't seen before. We had seen her threaten Annette Bening, which was the personification of the Supreme Intelligence. But yeah, like this is the first time seeing her go back and kill that, and it's like why wasn't that just the end of the last movie then?
Yeah, we're missing the second Miss Marvel movie is the problem. And
Captain
Marvel film. And that's a problem for this movie, is that it has to carry that burden. Because we get a very like repentant Captain Marvel in this movie who is, and that's like, I go back to my original point. I love stories that are about ultra powerful beings who, I have all the power in the world, but I'm still just a person. And so I make this big choice that should be good, but look at the negative fallout that comes from it. They go into a civil war. It destroys their planet. They're on like their last legs trying to figure out a way to save their planet. And it's meant to be like with great power comes great responsibility kind of story. And like that's one of the things I like that this movie does, but it's missing a lot of its weight because we don't have that in-between plot that we got to experience. We're just being told about it. This movie suffers a lot because of this, and it sucks. But despite that, it still is such and like shout out to kind of like bridging the gap is I want to make sure I get her name correct. But it is Teyonah
Parris.
Teyonah Parris. She does such a great job of kind of like bringing Captain Marvel from the past in these movies to a modern point of, hey, you didn't like, there's some, they have a good scene that I think should have happened maybe earlier in the film that they kind of avoid until they quote unquote can't avoid it any longer. And it comes during like the family building scene, like the passing powers around, doing all this stuff and like what they're doing with that, that they have that out. I think it does a great job of kind of like bringing Captain Marvel's story into a modern point by being like, she was a little kid, now she's an adult. This is the time being reflected of how much time Captain Marvel's kind of have lost. She kind of let that time slip away out of her guilt and her frustration. And like, this is the ramifications of that coming back to haunt her in a way. And now she has to deal with those ramifications. That's her story in this. I think Monica Rambeau is unfortunately a very underutilized character. I love her portrayal in this. I love her as a, like, I there's so much about it that I love about her portrayal of Monica Rambeau and Monica Rambeau as a character and what it means to kind of like be a blip character that we got to see her in WandaVision. She has a lot of meat to her character, and unfortunately, we just don't get enough time with her. Once again, this is the problem. We don't have enough time with any of these characters to have a better connection to them. Yeah. And so even though we have this really fun, good movie, there's not a emotional weight that goes along with it that I really wish we had had.
So I want to jump off that because the realization I've made as you were kind of talking is this to me ends up coming across as maybe the most DCEU movie that Marvel has done. And I mean that in the context of Justice League, very notably, didn't do all the legwork that the MCU had done to build up to the Avengers. It was like we've done a Batman, or we've done a Superman movie, now we've done a Batman versus Superman movie, and now we're doing Justice League. And we're gonna throw in all these other characters as video clips, and that's how we're going to introduce them into Justice League kind of thing, in Batman v Superman kind of thing. So like this has to do the work of being a sequel to Captain Marvel, being a sequel to WandaVision, being a sequel to Miss Marvel, and not really giving any of those their own thing. It's kind of sandwiching them all together. And so we end up getting like half-hearted backstories or just no real fleshed out backstories. And so it is in that vein, I think more time with each of these, as you said, kind of would have really benefited I think would have benefited each of these characters. I think Iman Vellani shines the brightest in this movie.
100%.
And there is a good chunk of that is this feels, of those three things, this feels most like a Miss Marvel sequel, more so than a Captain Marvel sequel.
Absolutely.
And in part because we've had so much more time with Miss Marvel, and we had her family in there, and her family makes the jump into this one. Versus my biggest gripe with the first Captain Marvel movie was, and continues to be, that Brie Larson's Captain Marvel is an amnesiac. And so like she has no character for most of that movie. And then like the end bit is her like finding her character, and that's just that's never compelling in such a short amount of time. So I think her performance suffers because of that in the first movie. It suffers from the writing. So this movie, again, given that she's popped up sporadically here and there, but never really she has not yet been fleshed out more as a character until this movie, is still having to do a lot of heavy lifting for who Captain Marvel is. We get a better sense of that now, finally. Most notably, I think, when she is kind of having the fun downtime moments with the other members of the Marvels. And I think those are easily my favorite moments of this. I think the core trio are all great together. They all knock it out of the park. Yeah. Especially like shout out to like the believable relationship that Teyonah Parris and Brie Larson have, considering they haven't been in a project together until this. Like it was a different character. You know, she was a kid in the last movie, the last Captain Marvel movie, and Teyonah Parris, even she, I would say, like, she's as much MacGuffin as anything else in WandaVision, where it's like, what's the mystery of that person who's, you know, an agent that is now, you know, made their way into this weird Wanda world. So I think like the movie suffers because it's trying to piece together three very disparate previous stories, previously ons, and so none of them really get a good fleshing out. And then beyond that, I'm not like, I think the plot is largely disposable and and doesn't serve any of those characters in their story. The best parts of the movie are the three of them just doing stuff away from the plot, just like figuring out their powers, figuring out how to switch up their entanglements and stuff like that. And I think it plays into also very fun like choreography and fight stuff where they can like play with that as like an added thing in their arsenal of moveset. And so I think creatively there's a lot of fun to be had there. It's just the plot of this movie is bad. There's no I mean, it's very like, and many people pointed this out already, but it's the Spaceballs plot.
Absolutely.
It's like, but not ironically.
No, nope.
It is like they're sincerely trying to do the Spaceballs plot, and I think nobody just pointed them out. It was like, hey, you've seen Spaceballs, right? So it's just weird.
That's a legitimate question actually to ask anybody who is involved with this project, because that is an old enough movie that maybe they haven't.
Yeah, true.
I will say though, to your point though, also,
and also like the plot of Spaceballs is not really what people remember about
true.
Spaceballs.
Absolutely true.
It is all of the bits and jokes in Spaceballs. It's very seldom the maid turning into a giant vacuum cleaner and sucking the atmosphere out of the planet.
And then they reverse the flow and it goes to blow.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a aspect of so much of what you said is absolutely true. It is like a DC movie. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yep. Nailed it. Man. There's a couple things I want to point out too, but one of the things I want to point out is one of the fun parts of that movie is like, oh, hey, here's a fun tidbit that's like, definitely we didn't need an entire movie about. Brie Larson's character, to help a friend out, marries royalty. Yeah. And
on a musical planet where they sing. It's where like that's such a fun idea, and we get so little of it that it's like what a waste.
It's total waste. It's not enough time with it. You immediately pick up that the prince and her have a very fun relationship and dynamic. Shout out to the freaking Princess Diana, Prince Charles plate that they discover on the planet, like that Monica and Kamala see in the window. They're like, what is this? And it's straight up like a commemorative plate of like the royal wedding. I pulled like from the old royal wedding. More recently would be like, you know, one of the more recent ones, William or Henry.
No,
they're not our royalty. We shouldn't care.
Yeah.
America. Shout out to King Charles having cancer though.
I mean, I feel like
I don't know why I said that. I shouldn't have said that. I'm going to shut up.
You don't need to shout out people with cancer.
Yeah, we're good on that. Anyway, moving on. That was totally out of left field for me, even. All right. So yeah, no, I think the Prince planet would have been a lot more
highlights.
Fun.
Yeah,
they should have spent more time on that a little bit, or just give us their full song. I didn't need the constant cutbacks to Kamala and Monica enjoying shrimp. Having a little shrimp party. That's a Dimension 20 reference for Trevor and I. Like could have had some more fun on that planet rather than going to like the 6 different planets we end up going to.
Yeah. Logan, any favorite moments or anything you want to shout out from the film?
I think tagging on to the Justice League comparison, I would also say that this is maybe less of an interesting idea than Justice League 2, right? Like the Justice League bum rushed into introducing all the characters, but it was to get to the idea of having, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, etc. all together, and that, the A team, right, of all these characters together. Versus here, they rushed together to get the Marvels together, right? And like that's kind of a weirder, like, why? Like, we could have taken our time in this one. If anyone was like demanding to see more of any of these characters, it would just be to see more of Miss Marvel after how well received that one was. But I don't know if we needed a team up of all of them together yet, right? And so it's also weird that they, I think, felt the urge to rush in. And like the reason they felt the urge to rush into this probably is because Brie Larson probably has either you have to be in this many movies contract, or you have this many years contract. In either way, we need to hit another one of those things to keep her in the contract. Because we're not going to do a Captain Marvel 2. That's just not going to happen now, right?
This was originally like Captain Marvel 2 is how this one was very much originally billed, and then it was, hey, and then the idea we have for Captain Marvel 2 is the Marvels is going to be, let's bring in Miss Marvel, let's bring in this character that is in the first movie but has grown up and kind of gets powers in WandaVision, and so like that was like, from Disney's perspective, this is a Captain Marvel 2 movie. But yeah, like as we touched on, with that, from all intents and purposes, no, this is a Miss Marvel 2.
That's the problem, right? Is that's how it started, but then again, Batman v Superman started off as Man of Steel 2, and it became something that wasn't that, right? Because even in Batman v Superman, I'd argue that's more of a Batman movie than a Superman movie. And this is a movie that was supposed to be Captain Marvel 2, but ended up becoming essentially Miss Marvel's 2, right? Or Miss Marvel's 1 for a film, right? And it's that thing of like, it's such a weird thing, right? Like, I mean, favorite parts is easy. It's anytime Kamala Khan steps on screen, right? I just think there's such an electricity to her scenes. Her family continues to be great, just like they were in the series. And like, I just think we have seen nothing else like that in the MCU. We don't have these like extended family jokey sequences in the MCU, either because these are comic book characters, so most of the families are
they're
dead.
All orphans.
Yeah. Or B, when we do get like any sort of family sequences, it's going to be Peter and Aunt May, or maybe like Tony with like Pepper Potts, like that kind of dynamic maybe. But like that's very different from most of Iron Man's run, and Peter and Aunt May is not the same dynamic here. This is just a genuine, like, loving, happy family doing things together. I think the movie has a lot of fun with kind of the physical comedy of all of the characters, which is also sort of unique in the MCU. And in some ways, I kind of like the almost out of body kind of surrealist nature they kind of go in. And there are some good gags. You mentioned one. I think one that like that's in the trailer of like the cat turning into like the monster is like a fun idea. But like it's sort of a little bit like Guardians 3, I think. Anytime Miss Marvel in particular, but even Captain Marvel aren't on screen, I just become less invested and interested in what's happening, right? And a little bit like with the Guardians, where it's like anytime Rocket's not on screen, I sort of care a little bit less. And I think this movie just struggles tonally and also just structurally in terms of what it's trying to do. I mean, the villain doesn't really matter, which has been a refrain, to be fair to the Marvels. You could make about 80% of the MCU movies, really, right? Like, how many have great villains?
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. Like, again, this one I know is Dar-Benn because I just made the doc, but like,
yeah,
I guess Ronan, we know because at least Guardians of the Galaxy builds up Ronan as a character, but like,
yeah, that's something.
Nobody knows Jude Law's character's name from the last movie. Like, it's just Jude Law. And so it is just this like, what's with the Kree being completely forgettable and disposable characters?
Yeah. Like, who's the main villain of Thor 2, right? To be like, ooh, like, that's a great question. I have no idea, right?
I know that, but that's just because I did a lot of like Phase 1 through 3 trivia nights. So
but
Malekith,
I don't, right?
And Christopher Eccleston as Malekith,
right. And I've seen, I mean, Phase 1 through 3 in particular, like I know really well. It's like I have no idea what his name is, right? It's like who? I mean, I just think this is a series that struggles with villains, which is sort of disappointing, right? I mean, like, and then like kind of the exceptions to that are, I would argue, Thanos or Loki, who is not even really a villain at this point, right? Like, and so beyond that, it's who Bucky, but he became not a villain, right? After Winter Soldier, and so
I would argue Winter Soldier is more like Pierce, but also I mean you have Killmonger. I think is the other big standout,
right?
Yeah,
right. Killmonger.
Yeah, but
even Killmonger, I think, has like
villains
sort of like
has always been a bad thing in the MCU.
Yeah, like Killmonger even is like a great example of who I think is a really great villain, but even he has like an anti-hero kind of aspect to him of like, he's bad, but also is his reasoning necessarily bad or not, right? You can kind of have that larger debate, right? And I think
I remember arguing
just a series that struggles with villains.
I remember arguing for a long time after Jessica Jones came out that David Tennant's Purple Man was like the most compelling and interesting villain in the MCU.
Also,
I'd say
worst
Vincent
as far as,
D'Onofrio as Kingpin. Goes. Like because the shows get more time with their villains, they end up usually getting a little bit more fleshed out, and we at least are more interested in them. That hasn't always been the case. The forgettable Flag Smashers in the Captain America and Winter Soldier show. The Secret Invasion's just absolutely terrible. Everything. So it's not always the case, but like especially in those Netflix shows, I felt like the villains were built up as much for their bad guy or for their because I mean even go to like Luke Cage had was it I forget which one it was that had
Luke Cage had a great villain.
Cottonmouth.
Cottonmouth,
the beginning
guys,
of it, but yeah, I mean, he's only the villain for like half of the season, kind of thing. But he was still, because it was Mahershala Ali, a notable and great villain. So, The shows have clearly just done it better than a lot of the movies, because a lot of the movies are like, let's build the team up, let's build this hero up, and the villain's almost always an afterthought. It also doesn't help that the MCU has just notably decided to kill off most of their villains in the movie, whereas comics, at least, like the villain always comes back. Obviously, like that's why Joker is lasts the test of time and does the thing.
Well, it helps when your hero famously doesn't kill people. That you gotta keep him in the roster a little bit longer, right?
Yeah.
Although to be fair, the more I think about it, it's like it makes sense because technically speaking, all of his villains are like mentally ill.
As is he.
Absolutely.
Cam, any favorite moments you want to shout out, or least favorite moments?
I mean, my favorite moments, obviously, like whether it's the dynamic between the three main characters, like they're like what's the word I'm looking for? Like they're not down low or low down, but like low key, like low energy, low like things going on. Those small like choir moments where like they're having fun as like a found family type thing that they're doing, or like mentee mentor type stuff. But those are my favorite moments, as well as any of the cool action sequences in combat that they get to pull off. Swapping places, swapping powers, all of that is just so awesome. But also like just really fun small moments, like it's Brie Larson like getting the first shift where she flies into a closet, she gets out and she looks around and she's surrounded by fan art.
Yeah. She goes downstairs. Like one of my favorite moments is when Kamala finds out that Captain Marvel was in the house from her family. She's like, she was here? Like just that, like the joy. Again,
those like body swapping things are great, I think, right? Yeah, like those moments work.
Kamala's family in general being great still.
Yeah. I remember being worried that like a lot of the body swapping, moments had been given away in the trailers, and I ended up being pleasantly surprised watching through, and like most of those are in that first fight, and are just a portion of that fight, then we get even more, and there's especially a lot more, destroying Kamala's house and all that stuff. So I really ended up they did a good job at kind of like teasing me with some stuff, but keeping a lot of that still close to the chest until the movie comes out. Let alone, once they actually start doing it on like intentionally and stuff down the line, I think they have a lot of fun with the creativity of that. But I I mean, some specific Kamala things that stand out for me are her Captain Marvel and Rambo kind of flying away, and she's like, I can't fly. Do you guys have a spaceship I can borrow? And Captain Marvel coming back, don't talk to them, they're the bad guys. Those are the moments that like will stick with me on this movie. I really enjoy that. But then when we get into like maybe more mixed or negative things, like I like that they approach the idea of like never meet your heroes with Miss Marvel, meeting Captain Marvel, and like Captain Marvel being real strict and being like, we've got to go, we can't save them all. But they wipe away that like too quickly, or they kind of they want their cake and eat it too. They want that tension, but then they immediately like apologize, and Miss Marvel's like, no, it's okay, I apologize for like setting unrealistic standards on you. It's like, okay, but I would have liked a little bit more tension. Just hold that tension a little bit longer throughout the movie or something, and they just don't.
Or don't tease it at all if you're not going to commit, right? That's like my thing, right? Like, go one way or the other, but you have to commit.
Yeah. The thing that even on a second watch, I continue to just absolutely hate about this movie, and admittedly, this hatred comes from another place, is the all the Flerken eating all the cast, all the crew and stuff, and like the fact that whole thing's played for laughs and stuff like that. It's like, while all of those characters are in a horror movie, it's played as a joke for us. And notably, I hate it because I hate Cats the musical, and Memory is playing over the top of that sequence, and I'm just like, this is terrible.
For me,
like,
it was.
I would hate it less if it had that, if it didn't have that music. That music seals the deal on why I don't like that sequence, but it's also like it's a creative solution that they wrote themselves into. They were like, we want to do this. We want to have like the big, sequence at the end being like all the cats eating people. So how do we justify that? Oh, let's make it so that all of the other escape pods, don't work, and we can only get this crew of hundreds of people into one escape pod. So let's put them all inside cats because cats are smaller and easier to get through. But yeah, I hate the musical Cats so very much. So whenever Memory is coming on, I'm like, fuck this noise, fuck this noise, fuck this noise. Any things that didn't work for either of you guys?
Oh, let's just point out what I thought you were actually going to go to. What the hell was Secret Invasion about if this movie exists?
I mean, that's also a given. Is like, this movie is actively worse if you watch Secret Invasion, and we're expecting any kind of like tie-in or payoff.
Yep, that's exactly my problem. We watched this right after we finished Secret Invasion, and just absolute like just fuck nothing. And God,
like part of the problem there, this movie was originally intended. It was originally slated to be before Secret Invasion. So if you have the understanding of this being a pre-Secret Invasion movie, it's better. But yeah, the fact that chronologically, and they don't do anything to correct that or to let the audience know that this is a pre-Secret Invasion movie. But no, the fact that Secret Invasion happens, you have Nick Fury up there without his wife that we meet in Secret Invasion.
Not only that, but like the space station gets destroyed at the end of this movie. Like,
I mean, they're back up and working on it again at the end of the movie. They're repairing it.
I guess that's fair. But then there was a reference for like, there's so many.
The bigger issues end up being, okay, well, this movie says, hey, Skrulls can come back to the planet. Valkyrie will grab them and put them in New Asgard. And it's like, okay, well, in a post-Secret Invasion world, like the president of the United States and vigilantes are out killing Skrulls and killing people who they think are Skrulls. So no, Skrulls and aliens in general are not welcome on Earth. And so that's a broader, bigger issue on that.
With the bigger thing also being like New Asgard is technically an alien, like alien people living
which is the other thing that this movie kind of highlights is like, okay, well, if that was your solution, then the people of Earth, I mean, Secret Invasion didn't need to happen. They didn't need to be in hiding. If New Asgard was just going to be like, yeah, we'll take more Skrulls. We'll bring the Skrulls in with us. Why did you need all those Skrulls hiding in Secret? This movie was very clearly done in a vacuum away from the writers of Secret Invasion, and they just were like, well, we're just not really going to care. We're not going to tie these two dots together.
What's the point of you having a Kevin Feige if there's no actual architectural, like putting things together and making sure things are coherent and make sense? Like, what has Kevin Feige been doing at his job the last 5 years? God damn it!
I mean, making lots and lots of money.
That to me is my biggest thing that I don't. I mean, maybe not. I don't like the most, but a huge thing for me is that like it just was like, what is the point of any of this, right? Like, what are we doing here, right? Like, it is a movie that goes on for an hour, 45 minutes. And it's just sort of like, what are we doing here, though? Like, what? And part of that is, to your earlier point, Trevor, of like, they rushed into this like DC did with Justice League. So you get a situation where, like, all three of these characters are in, like, very different parts of their respective arcs. And so it doesn't, like, line up nicely like it would in, like, Avengers 1, or kind of building towards it with all the characters. Here it's sort of like, Captain Marvel had a movie in between this and her movie, essentially, that we don't get to see. Mm-hmm. And so it's like a weird, like, all right, like, we're not on the same page as we were when we last left her. Like, Miss Marvel probably steps in the most seamlessly. And then for, like, the other Miss Marvel, if you didn't watch WandaVision, she means nothing to you, basically. You have no frame of reference for her, right? And, like, it's another problem of, like, if you're not watching the shows, you are lost. Like, for example, in Doctor Strange 2, one of my big issues with that movie. But also, if you are watching the shows, you're lost because this doesn't take into account Secret Invasion. So it's like this weird thing of like, you don't win either way. And so it's just sort of this weird, like, what's happening here? Like, what, like, where are we at? Which I think ties back into the larger point we made at the beginning of like, you know, it might not be a bad thing that the only MCU movie series is going to be Deadpool 3, which essentially is going to be meaningless to a lot of the larger MCU stuff. And so it can hopefully allow them time to figure stuff out. But it's just a weird movie that, I mean, I'm going to steal Trevor's line because I think it's the best way to describe the movie, was in essence made in a vacuum that had no sort of connection to anything around it. And so when you then try to watch it in that context, it's like, that doesn't really make sense from where we left her off or where we picked up here. Who is this person? Because I haven't really seen them before because I've only watched the movies. And so, yeah, it becomes this weird hodgepodge of things that I think the pieces themselves are great for the most part, right? Especially the main trio. But it sort of adds up into this thing that is, I think, half-baked, right?
Yeah.
The other Secret Invasion related failing, I would argue, is like Samuel L. Jackson is just a completely different character in this movie than any other Nick Fury that we've ever gotten, let alone the Nick Fury coming right off of Secret Invasion, a broken man who's just barely survived that endeavor.
It's
is out here cracking jokes with Kamala's family and you know, it's just what
even if you on either side of Secret Invasion, this is not that Nick Fury. He doesn't fit either of the pre-Secret Invasion or post-Secret Invasion. In pre-Secret Invasion, he's tired. He's been doing this a long time.
This is the Nick Fury from Far From Home.
Yes.
That the movie very clearly at the end is like, that wasn't Nick Fury.
Yes.
Don't worry. Yeah. That's why he was doing all these weird things, is because it wasn't Nick Fury. And here it's like, no, that apparently was Nick Fury. He cracks jokes now. And
It's so goddamn dumb. In such blatant, obvious ways. Anyway, I still like this movie a lot. It was still my second MCU film last year. My second favorite MCU film last year.
Yeah.
So
All right. Well, let's dive into the report card. We grade from A+ to F. Cameron, what do you want to give the Marvels?
I hate that I'm giving it to it, but honestly, there's so many things detracting from this movie. It's just only going to get a B from me.
A B? Okay. Logan, how about you?
I don't know. It's such a weird movie, isn't it?
I'll jump in first if you want to take some time to think. I'm going to give it a C. I think it has some A-level performances, especially Iman Vellani, but there's just so much else about this movie that, like, this movie doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is part of a larger story that is being told, and it actively, like, disregards a lot of those other chapters of this story in a way that just doesn't make sense and doesn't support even the own internal stuff of this movie. So there's just too much of a mess in this movie, despite there being some like really, really shiny moments, like the combat, like the choreography, like the core cast. But yeah, overall, it's just too much of a mess for me to give it anything higher than a C.
I'll split the difference. I'll say a C+. I think I'm going to copy a lot of what Trevor said. I think it's got really big flaws. But I think it is powered by kind of just the magic of its three leads so much that it sort of doesn't matter as much as it can, right? I think they just push it forward so much. I still think those flashes of what I really think of like Miss Marvel standalone movie could be. And I think the kind of joy and excitement and the silliness in this movie, I do really like a lot. I just think, it's a movie made in a vacuum that can't be in a vacuum. And its villain is totally forgettable. And there's just like a lot of like plotting issues that I would probably structure differently.
I had forgotten that the villain just basically kills themselves.
Yep.
Unintentionally, I guess.
Yep.
It's one of those like
too many bangles, too much power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The movie just kind of is like, we don't know how to finish this, so the power is just going to overtake her.
Yeah, that's the thing. I can't remember where we talked about this before, but like, it's a situation where like a movie makes a villain so overpowered that there's no like logical way for them to be beaten, and so it just has to come up with like, well, they're gone. We couldn't be bothered because we kind of boxed stuff in the corner, so like they're just gone now. Don't worry about it, right? And it's like think of like, but that's not a satisfying way to end it, right? And again, that's my issue with a lot of this movie, where it's just sort of like, you were almost there, right? Like you were so close to making this really cool, and then you just sort of miss it the last second, right? And like I feel like it is that throughout the entire film.
We were on the verge of greatness.
Yeah. Like you almost had it, and then you just sort of like whiffed it the last second. And that's sort of the Marvels. But like the performances are, I think, great in a way that like I don't think is the case in some of the other weaker AMC movies that have come out post Endgame.
Yeah, I think the conversation you're referring to, I think, came up with regards to Mission Impossible and like the all-powered AI just being like, sometimes it just has to completely disregard all of the other forward thinking it's been doing.
Just don't worry about it.
Yeah. All right. Then extra credit, other suggestions if you like this. Disney Plus is going to recommend Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, which is probably one of the ones on here you should actually watch. WandaVision, I will also shout out. Then Echo, Secret Invasion, which you just absolutely shouldn't watch, because again, I argue if you watch Secret Invasion, this is a worse movie.
You have a worse time.
Then there is Spider-Man Far From Home, Avengers Endgame, and Avengers Infinity War.
You should watch.
So feel free to watch any of those except Secret Invasion. Extracurriculars. Anybody watching anything else on Disney Plus?
No,
I need to watch Echo finally.
Yeah, I think Cam and I finally need to bite the bullet and watch Echo for maybe next week's show.
I forgot that.
So yeah,
which one is Echo again?
huh?
Which one is Echo?
Echo is she was introduced in Hawkeye. She's the deaf paraplegic, not paraplegic, but like missing a leg. She was a henchman of Kingpin. Kind of thing in that one. Yeah. So it's a 5-episode kind of dive into her backstory.
Oh, it's like a
backstory / the aftermath of Hawkeye, where she shoots Kingpin in the head.
Yep.
Okay.
And kind of has to deal with like fleeing from Kingpin's forces and stuff.
Sure.
Because weirdly, that doesn't fly.
Didn't like that.
Yeah.
Who'd have thought?
Yeah. But in particular, I think like there's the like Native American aspect to it, as well as the deaf aspect, and the thing that they added in to her because she just the actress was missing that leg, like got factored into the character's kind of backstory and stuff. So, yeah. So maybe we will be back with that next week. Or maybe we'll do something else again, all over again. Yeah, I don't think I've been watching anything else on Disney Plus. I think pretty much just been.
See,
yeah,
I'm gonna complain again. This is a little bit like Captain Marvel to me. The Hawkeye series is 2021, so we're getting essentially like a sequel to that 3 years later, right? Like these like giant gaps. That's just not. I don't know, man.
Yep.
They gotta figure this out.
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, there's an element of that that's been like a problem. When the MCU got too big,
yeah,
it like is once you got kind of past that first run of the Iron Man trilogy, the Captain America trilogy, then it was okay. We've introduced so many characters. And still need to introduce more that like you had 9 years between Doctor Strange movies or whatever it was.
Oh, that's right. God, it wasn't been crazy like that.
And so yeah, it's definitely the series has suffered as a result of expansion and we can only do 3 movies a year. So I mean, Captain America, Brave New World is going to be another one where it's like Captain America and Winter Soldier happened. 2020,
yeah.
Like I think it was like the second or third show. I don't remember if Loki came first or not, but it was like in that initial run of, hey, we're like, good thing we had these shows in the can because pandemic and stuff. But then it's okay that character and storyline has been sitting on ice for 4 years, and by the time we get to it in 2025. Tack one more year on. So yeah, it's just a suffering of the bloated, like we're throwing a whole bunch of new things into the mix. And I mean, to be honest, thank God they haven't thrown the X-Men and Fantastic Four into the mix as well yet, because that would just add even more to that pile of stuff.
That's the thing about that. The people who are excited about X-Men and Fantastic Four, and I guess I'm excited about it, right? But like, it's that thing for me of like, okay, but then you need to actually sunset some of these characters because that X-Men is going to become so unwieldy. There's just as many characters there as there are in the entire MCU. So like, you have to make decisions. You have to prioritize stuff, right? Like, and that's before you get to Fantastic Four and how complex that can be. Like, you just have to make cuts somewhere, otherwise you become. This isn't like comics. You can have 50 comic books going at once. It's like you can only have so many movies in a year. You can only have so many TV shows in a year. And otherwise people just stop paying attention. And it's not what you want, right, as the MCU. And so where are they going to put that focus, right? Do we really need another whatever movie? Or can we just say, great, we did that. We're going to kind of put that character out to pasture until we have another giant crossover event kind of thing. But like, yeah, I'll be curious to see how they balance all of that.
Yeah. Like like looking back through phase, like things that were introduced in phase 4. So yeah, now 3 years ago, I mean, are we going to see Shang-Chi pop up again? Are we ever going to see the Eternals pop up again? Because the end of the movie sure seemed to be setting up potential sequel stuff. It's is Harry Styles ever going to be back in the MCU? Is Brett Goldstein as Hercules at the end of Thor: Love and Thunder ever going to be a character in the MCU again, or was that just all right, there's a 30-second thing?
Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows where we're going to go with any of this? So there you go. Well, that is going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, everybody, for joining me to talk about The Marvels. You can follow Logan at LeftyLogie, LOGGY. Anything you want to give a shout out to, Logan?
Yeah. Trevor and Cam talked on Monday about things. I don't know. It's been very busy for me, but I know they had something go live that day, and they're also still doing stuff on the YouTube channel because they're freaks and monsters and most talented people in the world. So you should go check all of that out. And I think they did a wrap up on a series last week, and that's why I wasn't here.
On this show last week we did Percy Jackson.
Yep.
We did this.
I actually would have watched that.
We did season 1 of Percy Jackson.
We watched the entire season 1 of it. I binged it in a day.
Oh, you went hard.
Yeah,
Cameron binged the whole thing.
How many episodes are there?
Originally, it's eight episodes.
Half an hour each, so 4 hours total.
Yeah, the original plan was we'll do the first episode of Percy Jackson, and Cameron watched that and then kept watching, and by the end of the evening had watched the entire series. So it was like, all right, well, I guess we'll just talk about the whole series and do the season 1 wrap.
Trevor literally came out right
Percy
before it was at the point where he had stopped watching, and so we watched the rest of the season together.
Yeah,
to the point where we came in here because we're like, oh, and then Trevor's like, oh, you know that the last episode just dropped. You want to watch it?
Yeah.
And so we watched all 8 episodes. I watched all 8 episodes in a day.
So good.
Yeah.
It was extremely good. People should go check out that episode. We go into it a little bit, but overall, great time.
Yeah, there you go. And this last week's That Nerdy Site show was our first kind of normal show of the year, where Cameron talked about Pal World and the stuff he's been playing and watching. I talked about basically the much like I did when I went into Yakuza Like a Dragon. The next couple Yakuza games I played in advance of Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. So I talked about Yakuza 3 and 4 and Gaiden, the Man with No Name, and then a little bit of my Infinite Wealth impressions. So yeah, that's this week's That Nerdy Site show. You follow Cameron at Rev Cabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to the Let's Play series Trevor has been recording and putting out of Like a Dragon. Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth.
That's a good one.
Trevor has been just enjoying the hell out of that game, and I can tell that he's been enjoying his Let's Play recordings as well. Mm-hmm. It's always a good time when Trevor. I can tell Trevor's sitting waiting for me to go to bed, so that he can start. So you can sit down and record more Let's Plays.
Yeah.
That's always a weird feeling because normally Trevor's the one who's like not hanging out in the office very much. I know when a game's good because Trevor just lurks in the office, waiting like a cat waiting for me to leave the room.
Mm-hmm.
That's really funny.
You follow me at Trevor J. Starkey, and I will echo the Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth shout outs. We've got, as of this episode going live, 2 weeks worth, so 4 episodes so far. I've recorded up through episode 11, which took me to Dondoku Island finally in chapter 6, I believe it is. And then I recorded that episode during the day yesterday, I think, and then spent the next 8 hours just working on my Dondoku Island and getting it up to a 3-star thing because I'm just having flashbacks to all the hours I put into Animal Crossing. So yeah, just having a great time with Infinite Wealth. So go check out my time there. It's definitely, I'm focusing the Let's Plays on, for the most part, story stuff, and doing the level grinding and some of the side stories and stuff just kind of off camera in between episodes. So I did the Dondoku introduction, got it up to 1-star island, And the next episode will probably be like, all right, here's my 5-star island, and now let's go back to the main story stuff. Yeah, stay tuned for that in the coming weeks. You can find all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. If you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Ring notification bells, do whatever you do on the various things you're doing them on. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.